Greetings, metalheads, and welcome to No Nonsense Metal Reviews. I'm George, and today I'm back with a Live Killers. Another favourite live album of mine that I think if you're not aware of this one, you haven't heard it, you need to check it out. So, I haven't actually done a Live Killers review in a while, so it's probably well overdue. I completely appreciate live albums aren't every metalhead's cup of tea. Doesn't quite do it for every music fan, and that's fine. Some people just like their studio stuff, the full albums or the EP singles, whatever. They like their studio versions. I, on the other hand, like the studio versions. I'm also a big fan of a good live album. And one very good live album, which I picked up on CD format very recently, is the first live album from one of the most important, significant, pioneering bands of the US death metal scene. I am, of course, talking about the mighty Morbid Angel, and this is Entangled in Chaos, released 1996, I believe. A very, very good live album, I must say, but a very important live album as well. Not just to me, but to a lot of fans, because this album neatly kind of bookends and concludes the David Vincent era, the frontman, vocalist at that time, of Morbid Angel. Bookends that era, that first stage of the band. David, who was present on vocals and I believe on bass as well. Yep, so he was bass and vocals for the first 4/5 albums. Depends on if you include the Abominations of Desolation attempted debut album, which was meant to be released prior to the widely recognised Altars of Madness debut album, but for various reasons that did not happen. So this considered the debut. Regardless, it neatly concludes the David Vincent era, playing what is arguably one of the best live sets I think Morbid Angel could play, or any fan of Morbid Angel, particularly of that David Vincent era, could actually put together. Obviously, we know that David comes back years later. That's a whole different story. But this live album is freaking brilliant. It neatly concludes that first period of the band before Steve Tucker comes along and we get Formulas Fatal to the Flesh and so on and so forth. That's a whole nother story. This first period of the band includes some of the best albums in old school death metal, in my opinion. There's some underrated albums here. We all know the brilliance of Altars of Madness, which is heavily represented on this album, with the majority of certainly the best known tracks being performed. Interestingly enough, the live album, Entangled in Chaos, was actually recorded on the tour of the final album of that era, which is Domination. But weirdly enough, the album only includes one track performed live from the album. Interestingly, start to finish, it is just brilliant. It's just full of fantastic tracks, brilliantly performed. So this album, I believe, is actually recorded across a US tour, or maybe a world tour, in fact. The Dominate tour. As you can see on the inside of this insert here, there's a lot, probably can't see because it's tiny font, but there's a lot of tour dates along the edges there. A long tour, some cracking material. Yeah, it's probably bits and pieces, the best takes, if you like, spliced and mixed together. Don't care. Doesn't have to be one particular single night, in my opinion. Although I do like that authenticity of it being one show or maybe a couple of shows at a specific venue. This album, because of the brilliance of it, I don't really care. If it's recorded across a whole tour, totally fine by me. The album is produced by Trey Azagthoth, always mispronounce his surname, guitarist and founding member of Morbid Angel. So you've got Trey Azagthoth, and it's mixed and mastered by none other than Tom Morris, notable, famous individual from Morris Sound Studio, Tampa, Florida. So yes, it's been tweaked and stuff behind the console there. Again, does that matter? Because what you get here is essentially a live best of, but it is heavily leaning towards the first two albums. All of the tracks sound brilliant, the musicianship is faultless, and it's that original classic Morbid Angel lineup. I mean, it just reads like a VIP list, as you've got Trey on guitars, you've got Peter Sandoval on drums, legendary drummer. Obviously, you've got David Vincent, vocals and bass, and then you have the legendary Eric Rutan on guitars, and another absolute legend, known for probably most recently for his involvement in the band and also producing Cannibal Corpse. And also, if you're a Hate Eternal fan, then you're going to know Eric. Legends. And what you get here is some fine musicianship, really doing the studio versions justice, but they do have that nice raw, in the flesh, live appearance and sound. They have that kind of characteristic. So as I say, there's a lot of reliance on the sheer brilliance of Altars of Madness here, that debut, as we get a number of tracks from this album. So of course we kick off with Immortal Rites, which is the opening track from this album. We get Blasphemy of the Holy Ghost, Lord of all fevers and plague. I believe we get Chapel of Ghouls and Maze of Torment as well in there. Absolutely freaking brilliant. This album is one of my all-time favourite death metal albums. Absolutely love it. And interestingly, I haven't listened to it for a good sort of 6 months plus. In fact, I don't actually think that I had listened to it in 2024. I think it was stretching back into 2023 was the last listen. And I should be punishing myself for that, because this is just such an absolute masterpiece. I freaking love that album, start to finish. 1989, I believe. Yep, 1989. Just essential. Then we get some tracks from the second album. Get it right. Blessed Are the Sick. Now, this album is another fantastic one. I really love this one. There's a notable difference, yes. It's not as good as Altars of Madness, but I definitely think this is an underrated album for sure. So from this album, we get the brilliant Day of Suffering, and we get the title track, Blessed Are the Sick, or that section of it, as it's a bit of a double track on the actual studio album. I believe that's all from this one. So a few choice moments there, but absolutely brilliant. Then, as I say, we actually get a couple more tracks from Covenant, which is another absolute favourite of mine. We get the opening track, Rapture. We also get Blood on My Hands and Sworn to the Black. So there's a few choice tracks from this album. Covenant is such a brilliant album as well. I absolutely love that one. But finally, Dominate, which is it's a mixed album. I think there's some really good moments, and there's some that maybe just a little bit, I don't know, needs a little bit Morbid Angel flair to it. But that said, I do honestly feel this is a great album overall. Some great tracks there, some really good material. But we only get one track from it, closing off the album with Dominate, the opening track from this album, closes out their live set. So an interesting choice there, I have to say. Not playing more material from the new album on that tour, but then can you blame them? Because what you've got is an all-time benchmark death metal classic. So yes, you're going to lean heavily on that album. You've also then got two very solid albums. Again, certainly a benchmark in terms of Covenant, and absolute fan favourites. Absolute fan favourite album. So there's a wealth of that early material to draw on. Yeah, they've dipped in just a tad, just basically skim the surface of Domination, but hey, I'm not complaining, because what you've got here is greatest hits of that era on the road. And I'm always hesitant about that whole greatest hits live thing, but Morbid Angel delivering what is arguably my favourite live death metal album, or death metal live album from a death metal band, whatever. Freaking brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. They do the studio versions justice, but they're giving those tracks that live energy, that enthusiasm, and that power. And it sounds bloody brilliant. So the other reason, as I say, just picked this up recently as a CD for about £7, £6.99 on Amazon. But the other reason why I thought, yeah, this is a freaking live killer, is because it actually means quite a lot to me. Because my very first vehicle, which I had when I was 17 into 18, around that sort of time, only had a tape player. So of course, at that young age, late teen, I was looking to pick up some music that I could listen to in my car, because I'm not going to listen to the radio. Hell no. Devoted metalhead by that stage, of course. So what do I stumble upon? I stumble upon Earache Records, who still had some tapes available at that time. And this tape, I can tell you, was spun heavily. I only had the 4 tapes. So I had this, Brutal Truths, Extreme Conditions, and then I had Carcass, Wake Up and Smell the Carcass, and Swan Song. So this was given daily rotation on my way to 6th form. Freaking love it. Absolutely loved it. I played this so much in my little Nissan Micra, blasting out classic old school death metal at the maximum volume. So yes, it does mean a lot to me, but this was certainly such a huge influence on my progression as a death metal fan, as a metalhead. And as I say, I honestly do feel this is one of the best death metal live albums that you can get hold of. So I don't know if you can still get hold of this tape version, but I absolutely played this to death. Still in working order as well, I'd like to say. So Entangled in Chaos, absolute masterpiece. Morbid Angel at their very, very, very best, in my opinion, combining some of the key tracks from those first 3 albums in particular. If you do need convincing, I would say just check out the album, because it's not that long. It's less than 40 minutes in total, but particularly brilliant tracks include Blasphemy of the Holy Ghost, or Blasphemy, Lord of All Fevers and Plague, I would say Chapel of Ghouls, and Blood on My Hands. Just masterpieces. Absolutely brilliant. David Vincent, legendary vocalist. His voice is iconic. It's synonymous with Morbid Angel and old school death metal. He's a real benchmark vocalist, and his more recent outings with Ultimass, they've lived up to expectations, in my opinion. He's still got it, still going strong. Trey and Eric, absolute beasts. Those riffs are freaking monstrous. Absolutely love it. Right the way throughout, I think that both Trey and Eric are such unique musicians and guitarists. Trey in particular, he has such a frighteningly identifiable, iconic guitar sound. It's a shame that he's quite inactive these days in the music scene, but you know what? His work here on these first 4 albums in particular, but also Entangled in Chaos, absolutely blinding. Those leads are stunning, absolutely fantastic. Those rhythms are brilliant. And of course, Pete, absolutely hammering the kit, giving it a seriously chaotic time. It's just brilliant. Start to finish, brilliant, brilliant stuff. If you like death metal, if you like old school death metal, if you like more aggressive thrash, because at times Morbid Angel were teetering on that line, certainly in the earlier years, then check out Morbid Angel, check out Entangled in Chaos, and see if you can match that. Dig out your tape copy, or at least try and find one, because that's a nice relic to have. Now I've just got to get vinyl and have the complete package. So my friends, what are your thoughts and opinions on Entangled in Chaos? What are your thoughts and feelings on the early era? Are you more of a fan of the older era, or more recent era, I should say, or the early era of Morbid Angel? Let me hear your thoughts and opinions on this one. Thank you very much for watching, my friends. Please do feel free to like, subscribe, share, comment. It's all very much appreciated. Do check back soon for more reviews and recommendations. Until next time, take care of yourselves and stay heavy.